What happens when one of the most recognized faces in the world walks onto a late-night talk show and completely loses control? It only took 32 seconds of pure arrogance for a royal guest to go from charming to catastrophic. This is the story of the night Prince Harry got kicked off Bill Maher's show after a heated exchange that nobody saw coming. The studio lights were hot that evening. Bill Maher sat behind his desk with that trademark smirk on his face, the one that told you he was ready for anything. The audience was buzzing with excitement because tonight's guest was royalty. Actual royalty. Prince Harry himself was scheduled to appear, and everyone expected a fun conversation about his life, his family, maybe some stories about growing up in the palace. The intro music played, and Harry walked out with a big smile. The crowd went wild. People were standing up, clapping, cheering like they had just seen their favorite movie star. Harry waved to everyone, shook Bill's hand, and sat down in the guest chair. Everything seemed perfect. Everything seemed like it was going to be a great show. Bill started with the easy questions. He asked Harry about his new projects, about his kids, about what it was like living in California after spending so many years in England. Harry answered everything with charm. He was funny. He was relaxed, and the audience loved him. They laughed at his jokes. They clapped when he talked about his family. It was exactly what everyone wanted to see. Then Bill shifted gears. He leaned back in his chair, that smirk growing just a little bit wider. "So, Harry," Bill said, "let's talk about something real for a second. Then you've been pretty vocal about a lot of issues lately. Privacy, the media, all of that. But I gotta ask, don't you think it's a little strange to complain about privacy when you're constantly doing interviews and writing books about your private life?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension in the room shift like someone had just turned down the temperature. Harry's smile faded just a little bit. He sat up straighter in his chair. "Well, Bill," Harry said, his voice calm but firm, "there's a difference between choosing to share your story and having it stolen from you by tabloids who make things up." Bill nodded slowly, like he was thinking about it. But anyone who knew Bill Maher knew he wasn't backing down. Sure, Bill said. "But you have to admit, you're making millions of dollars off these stories. You're on talk shows. You're doing documentaries. At some point, doesn't it just become another form of the same thing you're complaining about?" Harry's jaw tightened. You could see it on his face. He wasn't expecting Bill to push this hard. Most hosts just let him talk, nodded along, agreed with everything he said. But Bill wasn't most hosts. "I think you're oversimplifying it," Harry said, his voice getting a little sharper. "I'm trying to take control of my narrative. That's different." "Is it though?" Bill shot back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want all the benefits of being famous without any of the downsides. You want people to care about what you have to say, but you don't want them to ask questions. You want the spotlight, but only when it's shining the way you want it to." The audience was dead silent now. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others were leaning forward in their seats, waiting to see what would happen next. This was not the fun, lighthearted interview anyone had expected. This was turning into something else entirely. Harry let out a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You know what, Bill? I came here thinking we could have an intelligent conversation. But I can see now that you're just like all the rest of them. You don't actually want to understand. You just want to make me look bad for your audience." Bill raised his eyebrows. "Oh, I'm trying to understand. Trust me. What I don't understand is how someone who grew up with literally every advantage in the world can sit here and act like they're some kind of victim. You grew up in a palace, Harry. A palace. Most people can't even imagine that kind of life." "You have no idea what my life was like," Harry snapped. His face was getting red now. His hands were gripping the armrests of his chair. "You think living in a palace means everything is perfect? You think money and titles protect you from pain? From loss? You clearly don't know anything about me or my family." Bill held up his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, I'm not saying your life was easy. I'm just saying that compared to 99% of the planet, you had it pretty good. And maybe, just maybe, constantly complaining about how hard things are for you comes across as a little tone deaf. That was it. That was the moment everything changed. Harry stood up from his chair. The audience gasped. Bill looked genuinely surprised for the first time all night. Tone deaf? Harry repeated, his voice rising. You want to talk about tone deaf? You sit here every week making jokes about things you don't understand, judging people you've never met, acting like you're so much smarter than everyone else, and you call me tone deaf? Bill stayed seated, but his expression had changed. The smirk was gone. Now he just looked calm, professional. Harry, I think you should sit down. We can talk about this like adults. Like adults? Harry laughed again, that same bitter laugh. You mean the way you've been talking to me? Condescending? Dismissive? Acting like my experiences don't matter because I had money? That's your idea of adult conversation? Bill took a deep breath. You could tell he was trying to stay professional, trying to keep the show from completely falling apart. Look, Bill said, his voice steady. I ask tough questions. That's my job. If you can't handle someone challenging your point of view, then maybe you shouldn't be doing these interviews in the first place. Harry pointed a finger at Bill. Challenging my point of view is one thing. What you're doing is attacking me. There's a difference, and you know it. I'm not attacking you, Bill said calmly. I'm pointing out contradictions. Big difference. Harry shook his head. You know what? I don't have to sit here and listen to this. I came here as a favor, to talk about important issues, and all you want to do is tear me down. Bill leaned forward in his chair. A favor? You came here to promote your projects, Harry. Let's be honest about that, at least. And as for tearing you down, I'm just asking the questions that a lot of people are thinking. The difference is, I'm willing to say them out loud. The audience was watching this like a tennis match, their heads turning back and forth between Harry and Bill. Some people had their phones out, recording everything. This was the kind of moment that would be all over social media within minutes. Everyone in that room knew they were witnessing something huge. Harry's face was completely red now. You think you're so brave, don't you? Sitting there behind your desk, safe in your little bubble, saying whatever you want. You have no idea what it's like to have the whole world watching your every move, judging everything you do. Bill couldn't help but laugh at that. Are you serious right now? Harry, I've been doing this show for years. I say controversial things every single week. I get death threats. People protest outside the studio. So please, don't lecture me about being watched and judged. The difference is, I don't cry about it on every platform I can find. That comment hit Harry like a slap in the face. For a moment, he just stood there, speechless. Then he said something that everyone in that studio would remember for a long time. You're a bitter, cynical old man who gets off on making people feel small. That's all you are. That's all you'll ever be. The audience gasped again, louder this time. A few people even booed. You could hear someone in the back yell, "Come on, man!" Bill's face went stone cold. He stood up slowly from his chair, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet, but firm. Okay, we're done here. Oh, now you want to be done? Harry said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Can't handle it when someone fights back? Bill looked directly at Harry, his expression unchanged. No, Harry. We're done because you just insulted me on my own show. I invited you here. I treated you with respect. I asked you legitimate questions, and instead of answering them like an adult, you threw a tantrum. So yeah, we're done. Respect? Harry laughed. You call that respect? Yes, Bill said firmly. I do. Because respect doesn't mean agreeing with everything you say. It means taking you seriously enough to challenge you. But clearly, you're not interested in that. You just want people to nod along and tell you how right you are about everything. Harry stared at Bill for a long moment. The whole studio was holding its breath. Then Harry said, "You know what? You're right about one thing. I shouldn't have come here. This was a mistake." "I agree," Bill said. "And I think it's time for you to leave." Harry's eyes widened. "Are you kicking me off your show?" Bill nodded. "Yes, I am. You called me a bitter old man on live television. You disrespected me. You disrespected this show, and you disrespected this audience. So yes, Harry, I'm asking you to leave." For a second, it looked like Harry might argue. His mouth opened like he was about to say something, but then he closed it. He looked around at the audience, and maybe he realized how bad this looked. Maybe he realized he had gone too far. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. "Fine," Harry said quietly. "I'll leave." He turned and started walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him every step of the way. Nobody in the audience said anything. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. They just watched as Prince Harry, one of the most famous people in the world, walked off the set in complete silence. Bill sat back down at his desk. He straightened his papers, took a sip of water, and looked directly at the camera. "Well," he said with a slight shrug, "that was interesting. We'll be right back after this break." The studio cut to commercial, but the damage was done. The entire exchange had been broadcast live. Millions of people had just watched Prince Harry lose his temper and get kicked off a talk show. The moment Harry disappeared through that exit, people were already talking about it online. Twitter was exploding. News websites were writing headlines. Everyone had an opinion. But let's rewind and really understand what happened here. Because this wasn't just a simple argument between two people. This was a clash of two completely different worlds. On one side, you had Bill Maher, a comedian and talk show host who built his entire career on asking tough questions and not backing down. A guy who made his name by being willing to say the things other people were afraid to say. On the other side, you had Prince Harry, someone who had spent his entire life being treated differently because of who his family was. Someone who was used to people either loving him or hating him, but rarely challenging him face to face. Someone who had grown accustomed to telling his story his way, without much pushback. When these two worlds collided, something had to break. And what broke was Harry's composure, because Bill didn't treat him like royalty. Bill treated him like any other guest, someone whose ideas and statements could be questioned and examined. And Harry clearly wasn't ready for that. You think about the questions Bill asked. Were they unfair? Not really. He pointed out that Harry complains about privacy while doing constant interviews. He mentioned that Harry had significant advantages growing up. He suggested that Harry's narrative about being a victim might not resonate with regular people who face real hardship. These weren't attacks. These were observations that a lot of people had been thinking, but were too polite to say. But Harry took them as attacks. And that's where things went wrong. Instead of engaging with the questions, instead of defending his position calmly and rationally, Harry got defensive. He got angry. He made it personal. And once he made it personal, once he called Bill a bitter old man, there was no coming back from that. Bill had every right to kick him off. Think about it from Bill's perspective. And he's hosting a show. He's asking questions. And his guest, instead of having a conversation, starts insulting him. What else could Bill do? Let Harry keep going? Let him turn the whole show into a shouting match? No. Bill did the professional thing. He ended it. And the way Bill handled it showed real class. He didn't yell. He didn't insult Harry back. He just calmly said they were done and asked Harry to leave. Then he sat back down, made a quick comment, and went to commercial like nothing had happened. That takes control. That takes discipline. Meanwhile, Harry stormed off like a child who didn't get his way. He couldn't handle being questioned. He couldn't handle someone disagreeing with him. And when things didn't go the way he wanted, he lost it. That's not how adults handle conflict. Like, that's not how someone who claims to care about important issues conducts themselves. Let's look at some of the specific things Harry said during this exchange. When Bill asked about the contradiction between wanting privacy and doing constant media appearances, Harry's response was that he was taking control of his narrative. But is that really true? Because from the outside, it looks like Harry just wants to tell his side of every story without anyone being allowed to question it. When Bill pointed out Harry's privileged upbringing, Harry said Bill had no idea what his life was like. And, okay, that's fair. None of us know exactly what it's like to grow up in the royal family. But Harry's response completely missed the point. Bill wasn't saying Harry never experienced pain or difficulty. He was saying that compared to most people, Harry had tremendous advantages. And that's just factually true. Then there was the moment when Harry accused Bill of not understanding things and judging people he'd never met. The irony there is incredible. Because Harry was literally judging Bill, someone he had just met, based on Bill's show. Harry was doing exactly what he was accusing Bill of doing, and that bitter old man comment. That was the breaking point. That was when Harry showed his true colors. Because when you can't win an argument with logic or reason, you resort to personal attacks. You try to hurt the other person. You try to make them feel bad. And that's exactly what Harry did. Bill's response to that insult was perfect. He didn't get angry. He didn't fire back with his own insults. He just said they were done. He took away Harry's platform. He refused to engage with someone who couldn't have a civil conversation. That's power. That's control. The audience reaction throughout this whole thing was telling, too. At first, they loved Harry. They cheered when he walked out. They laughed at his jokes. But as the conversation got more heated, they got quieter. And when Harry called Bill a bitter old man, some of them actually booed. They saw what was happening. They saw Harry losing control, and they didn't like it. When Harry walked off that stage, he walked off alone. No applause, no support, just silence. And that silence spoke volumes. It said that even people who came to see Harry, people who were probably fans, thought he had gone too far. Think about what this moment reveals about Harry's character. He talks a lot about mental health, about being open and vulnerable. It's about having difficult conversations. But when he was actually in a difficult conversation, when someone actually challenged him, he couldn't handle it. All that talk about growth and understanding went out the window the second things got uncomfortable. Compare that to Bill's behavior. Bill stayed calm the entire time. He asked his questions. He made his points. And when Harry crossed a line, Bill ended it professionally. That's what maturity looks like. That's what emotional control looks like. This whole incident also raises bigger questions about Harry's public persona. He's built this image of himself as someone who's broken free from the constraints of royal life, someone who speaks truth to power, someone who's not afraid to be real. But is that actually true? Because what we saw on that stage was someone who can dish it out, but can't take it. Someone who wants to be treated as special while claiming to be just like everyone else. Bill exposed that contradiction, and Harry didn't like it. So instead of acknowledging it, instead of having a real conversation about it, Harry threw a fit. He tried to make Bill the bad guy. He tried to paint himself as the victim of yet another attack, but anyone watching could see what was really happening. What makes this even more interesting is that Bill has interviewed countless celebrities, politicians, and public figures over the years. He's had heated debates with people from all sides of every issue, but he rarely kicks anyone off his show. For him to actually end an interview and ask someone to leave, that person has to really cross a line. And Harry crossed it. The fact that Harry couldn't see this coming is almost shocking. Did he really think he could insult Bill on Bill's own show and face no consequences? Did he think his title would protect him? Did he think Bill would just sit there and take it because Harry is a prince? If that's what Harry thought, then he severely underestimated who he was dealing with. Bill Maher didn't become successful by backing down from people. He became successful by standing his ground, by asking hard questions, by not being afraid of powerful people. Harry walked into that interview thinking he could control the narrative the way he does in most media appearances. But Bill wasn't having it. And when Harry realized he couldn't control the conversation, he lost it. The moment when Bill said, "We're done here," was the moment he took back control of his show. It was a statement that said, no matter who you are, no matter what title you have, if you disrespect this show and this host, you're gone. That's a principle. That's integrity. And Harry's response, that sarcastic, "Oh, now you want to be done?" just made things worse. It showed that even in that moment, Harry still didn't get it. He still thought this was about Bill being unable to handle conflict. He didn't understand that it was about him crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed. When Bill explained why they were done, when he laid out exactly what Harry had done wrong, Harry still couldn't accept it. He questioned whether Bill had shown him respect. But Bill did show respect. He invited Harry on his show. He engaged with Harry's ideas. He took Harry seriously enough to challenge him. That's respect. What Harry wanted wasn't respect. It was agreement. It was validation. And those are very different things. The final exchange, where Bill confirmed he was kicking Harry off, and Harry quietly agreed to leave, was almost anticlimactic after all that tension. But it was also revealing. In that moment, when faced with the reality of the consequences of his actions, Harry backed down. He left. He didn't keep fighting. Maybe some part of him realized he had messed up. Or maybe he just wanted to get out of there. Either way, the walk off that stage was a walk of shame. Harry knew it. Bill knew it. The audience knew it. Everyone watching at home knew it. This wasn't a triumphant exit where Harry stood up for himself against an unfair interviewer. This was a man who lost his temper and said things he shouldn't have said and faced the consequences. Bill's final comment before the commercial break was masterful. "Well, that was interesting." Just 4 words, delivered with a slight shrug. No dramatics, no victory lap. Just a simple acknowledgement that something unusual had happened, and then moving on. That's professionalism. That's grace under pressure. This whole incident is a perfect example of what happens when someone who's used to being in control meets someone who refuses to give them that control. Harry has spent years crafting his public image, carefully choosing which interviews to do, which stories to tell, which platforms to use. But Bill's show wasn't that kind of platform. It was a place where guests get challenged, where ideas get tested, where nothing is off limits. Harry walked into that environment unprepared. Or maybe he was prepared, but he thought his usual tactics would work. Deflect, play the victim, make it about other people not understanding him. But Bill didn't let those tactics work. He kept pushing. He kept asking questions. And eventually, Harry cracked. The thing is, if Harry had just engaged with the questions honestly, this could have been a great interview. He could have explained his perspective on privacy versus publicity. He could have acknowledged his privilege while also talking about his struggles. He could have had a real, nuanced conversation. But he didn't want that. He wanted to be agreed with. And when that didn't happen, he melted down. This moment will be remembered for a long time. Not because it was some huge scandal or because anyone got hurt, but because it showed the real person behind the carefully managed public image. It showed what happens when Harry doesn't have complete control. It showed the entitlement, the anger, the inability to handle criticism. And once people see that, they can't unsee it. Bill Maher came out of this looking like exactly what he is, a professional interviewer who asks tough questions and doesn't back down. Someone who runs his show with integrity, and won't let guests disrespect him or his audience. Someone who knows how to handle conflict without losing his cool. He's the good guy in this story because he did everything right. Prince Harry came out of this looking like someone who talks about growth and understanding but can't actually demonstrate those qualities when tested. Someone who wants all the benefits of fame without any of the scrutiny. Someone who will lash out when challenged. He's the antagonist in this story because he made himself one. Not through what Bill did, but through how he chose to respond. And that's the real tragedy of this whole situation. Harry had an opportunity here. An opportunity to show that he could handle difficult conversations. An opportunity to prove that he's more than just another celebrity who can't take criticism. But instead, he proved the opposite. He showed that when things get tough, when someone actually pushes back, he falls apart. The silence as Harry walked off that stage will echo for years. It was the sound of disappointment. The sound of people realizing that maybe Harry isn't who he claims to be. The sound of a moment that changed how millions of people see him. And it all happened because he couldn't control his temper for one interview. Bill Maher sat there after Harry left, straightened his papers, and moved on with his show. Because for Bill, this was just another night at work. Another interview. Another guest who couldn't handle the heat. But for Harry, this was a defining moment. A moment where the mask slipped and everyone saw what was underneath. And what they saw wasn't pretty. This is what happens when entitlement meets accountability. When privilege meets reality. When someone who's used to being treated like royalty gets treated like everyone else. Harry couldn't handle it. Bill did. And that's why in this story, Bill is the good guy, and Harry is the one who walked away in shame.